Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special webinar to talk about the Adopt Fund, which was launched. The launch webinar was yesterday. It was launched just a couple of days ago. I'd just like to stress that this webinar is not an official webinar about Adopt. It's not one of the official Innovate ones, nor is it run by the Adopt Support Hub. But we do have some experts in farmer-led innovation joining us, and you can see the organizations they represent at the bottom of the screen here. My name's Tom Allen Stevens. I'm Managing Director of BOFIN Farmers. We have a number of projects running across the UK at the moment, a number of farmer-led projects. But what I'd like to do just quickly is, to start with, is to run through the Adopt Fund itself. So it stands for Accelerating Development of Practices and Technologies. This is a really exciting development. You know, all the organizations here have been working really hard with DEFRA to get this off the ground. It's an important part of the Farming Innovation Programme, which is a DEFRA a funded programme that lasts throughout the period of the transition. There is supposed to be £270 million that's going to be used within that fund to do various innovation projects, and this is specifically the farmer-led element of it. Initially, when it was announced, there were £43 million was going to come through this. Well, the current government has reduced that to 20 million, but still, that's still a significant fund. So we'll talk more about what the opportunities are for farmers through the webinar. So what is Adopt? So the actual projects that they're looking for they're worth between 50 and 100,000, and the projects can range from 6 months up to 24 months, so 2-year projects. They must be exploited and share the results within England. The idea is that it benefits English farmers because this is DEFRA. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as to who has to lead the project, who can be involved in terms of farmers. But all the work must carry out within the UK. That doesn't mean to say that Scottish and Welsh and Northern Irish farmers can't be involved. They can, but it has to be an English farmer who leads it. So it must embrace innovation principles and be willing to share results with other farmers, growers, or foresters. And we'll talk a bit more about that with the experts in a bit. You must work with a project facilitator. So this is a mandatory part of this project. You have to get a project facilitator involved to run your project, and details of those are available on the Innovate UK database, and we'll have details of that later. And also, importantly, there is the Adopt Support Hub. Anyone who has dealt with Innovate will know that it's not an easy organization to deal with, but help is at hand from the Adopt Support Hub that's run by ADAS UK Agri-TechE centres and Innovative Farmers. And that's a really, really important element of this. I believe we've got 1 or 2 representatives of the Support Hub who are joining us here today. We've got Becky Swinn from Innovative Farmers on the panel, but she's very much joining as an expert in farmer-led research rather than necessarily someone who's representing the Adopt Support Hub. As far as leading a project is concerned, as I say, you have to be an English farmer to lead it. What they're looking for is a project idea that addresses major on-farm or immediate post-farm gate challenges or opportunities. And we'll talk a bit more in detail about that. This is really what we want to focus on. What sort of projects are in scope? So collaborate. You have to collaborate with at least one other farming business. So so there's the lead farmer, who has to be an English farmer. You have to get at least one other farmer involved. And as I say, that can be farmers in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland as well. There's an option to bring in a research or commercial organisation, so you can bring in the likes of Harper Adams or University or Rothamsted, John Innes Centre, those sorts of institutions, or you can bring in new tech companies. Perhaps there's a piece of tech that you're particularly interested in developing on your farm, and you can recover 80% of your costs. So the whole idea within the Farming Innovation Programme, you get a majority of your costs covered, and the standard amount is usually 70%. The farmers are expected to put in a portion of their own costs into it. With this round, that they've increased that for farmers only to 80%. So that's good news. Dates and process. Now, it's a two-stage process. To actually do a proper proposal is quite a job, and you're strongly encouraged to get a facilitator to help you with that process. It is quite a laborious thing, and there's certainly things that the assessors will be looking for. You have a grant of 2,500 to help you, and you can apply for that grant. And that's the first stage to apply for that grant. And then you can apply for a full adopt grant. Now, the dates of this, they've already announced that there's going to be at least 2 rounds here. So round 1 closes on the 11th of June, but round 2 opens the next day. That's for the facilitator grant, the 2,500. And then the actual fund won't start for the facilitator fund won't start until September. The full adopt grant that closes on the 25th. The round 1 closes on the 25th of June. Then round 2 opens the next day. And the delivery would have to be would start at the earliest 1st of November, run through to the 31st of October. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that you're not going to find out whether you're successful with the facilitator grant until after you've applied for the full grant. We're going to talk about that. Anyway, I can see we've got 1 or 2 hands. What I was going to say is, if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen, or the chat. Let's get the chat going. But we do want lots of questions coming. There were loads of questions in the launch webinar yesterday. Just a few diary dates of things that are coming up. We've got our inspiration days, which is bringing together our trialist farmers and any other BOFIN members. You're more than welcome to come along to these. There's one on the 6th of May, Kelso in Roxburghshire, where we're going to be discussing our trials and how to do the trials, but also looking in particular at Adopt. There is also the Farmers Weekly Transition Live event coming up next week at Leeds University Farm, and they've introduced into that a special innovation bit into each of the sessions, and in particular there's one on Adopt. UK Agri-TechE Centre will be exhibiting there, and so will we, and you would very much welcome farmers who are interested in Adopt to come and discuss that with us. We've also got our South Inspiration Day at Cambridge, so that's very much the same format as the North Inspiration Day. Then there's the cereals event coming up on the 11th and 12th of June, and also Groundswell on the 2nd and 3rd of July. And most of the experts organisations that are joining us today will be exhibiting at least one of those events. So do come along to those events to talk to people, to talk through your ideas. And here's some further support. So if you're used to using QR codes, the Adopt Support Hub, as I say, is a key element of this of Adopt. So take a link through to there and find out what's on there, and that's first port of call for most questions, really. We have got the BOFIN WhatsApp community, which we've just set up, which is supporting people. And I hope that as many people as possible will come and join that. That's an area to discuss and share ideas. And then there's also the Project Facilitator database, which is run by Innovate UK, which I mentioned earlier. And I've got all the contact details for us at BOFIN there as well. But I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to ask our experts to join us. Please, if you'd like to turn on your camera and join us, fantastic. What I'm going to ask you to do is just introduce yourselves and who you represent, and also give us an idea of a farmer-led project that you've been involved in, or one that you would like to see come forward in this Adopt round. So first of all, Kate Pressland from the Centre of Innovation and
It's a mouthful, Tom.
Would you like to explain who you're from?
Yeah. So it's the Centre for Effective Innovation in Agriculture. Nice and snippy, but it's actually a project across 5 universities. We mostly have been focused on how research funding and innovation funding can better help farmers on the ground and see a much better pathway in that respect. But my former life, I worked with Becky and others on innovative farmers, and I worked on that on the really early days. It started in 2012, but I joined it in 2013 and sort of was quite involved in its evolution, I would say, because it went through various forms, and a lot of that thinking has informed me when I've been talking to DEFRA and Innovate UK about how Adopt should be structured to best meet the needs that Innovative Farmers and other programs like it really identified were needed and wanted, and what elements worked well. So whilst I haven't gone and done loads of on-farm trials personally myself, I'm not a farmer, I have really been obsessed perhaps in trying to find models that really make it work. And so I have slightly lived and breathed adopt, and it's been called various things over the years for about 5-6 years maybe since it first was talked about. So I sort of know a lot about why it looks the way it looks. It's not perfect, but why it's shaped that way, why it looks slightly different to other funding, and why that's important, and also lessons learned from other funding programs that just didn't hit the mark here, and what I would love to see come through in project ideas and the way in which it develops and what gets funded and the enthusiasm behind it. You know, I've got sort of strong views on what I'd love to see come through. So I'll leave it there.
Well, would you like to just give us an example of the sort of project that you think is ideal for this?
So I would love to see groups of farmers come together. So you might have an individual farm lead, but I think it's really powerful when farmers work as a group. The knowledge sharing is huge. And I like the facilitator support, because that just helps keep the show on the road. If there's any kind of challenges around communication between a researcher or an innovating company and the farmers, you can sometimes get sort of funny things happen, like the experimental design might get extremely difficult and no farmer ends up wanting to do it, or that kind of, those kinds of failure points. A facilitator is well placed, if they really are good listeners, to try and manage that and make sure it's really focused on getting impact, real impact on the ground, and gonna change management. Whether the experiment works or not, something improves. And that's the kind of project I would love to see happen. It doesn't have to be around a piece of tech. It doesn't have to be around that. It can be around anything that you've wanted to do for a long time that you keep kicking down the road. Let's just crack on and give it a try across more sites, more data, more learning. That's the kind of thing I'd love to see.
Great. No, thanks for that, Kate. Moving on to Belinda Clarke from Agri-TechE. Would you like to introduce yourself, Belinda?
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, Agri-TechE, we're an independent, not-for-profit membership organisation. We're now in our 11th year, and really our mandate is helping to inform and accelerate the journey of new tech practices into the field, or the polytunnel, or the glasshouse, or indeed more latterly the vertical farm. And so we have this, we call it an innovation ecosystem, that's made up of a series of communities of farmers and growers, tech developers, researchers, and professional and technical service providers, so vets, agronomists, those people who sit in front of farmers and have their ear and their trust. And so what we spend probably the majority of our time doing is connecting up tech developers, researchers, farmers and growers, talking about adoption, implementation of new ways of doing things. Now, a lot of that is around tech, obviously, but we work across all of the, what we might call technology readiness levels, from fundamental research through to ready to face the market. And to your question about farmer-led projects, we were very proud to coordinate a field lab from the Innovative Farmers programme, looking at the role of digestate and cover crops on retaining nitrogen in the field. So that was a 2-year project. We'd love it to have been a 22-year project. What data we would have got from that would have been amazing. But I guess one of the sort of flagship projects that we sort of like to remember, because of the scale of the impact it's had, was led by G's growers. And they were worried about the need to overplant in order to meet contract. And they will openly say they were possibly overplanting by about 20% to ensure that they had enough product, you know, given the vagaries of agriculture. And we ended up connecting them with some tech developers who were writing some, back in the day, quite forward-thinking crop forecasting, modelling algorithms, which at the time was called IceCam for iceberg lettuce, and has now been rolled out across all of their crop portfolio in different geographies as well. So that was sort of the first iteration almost of this forecasting, crop prediction, modelling, so you can use your data for those all-important actionable insights.
Yep. No, I know that project. It is quite groundbreaking, actually. Moving on, Holly Shearman from Innovation for Agriculture. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Thank you very much for having me today. So I'm Holly Shearman and I work for Innovation Agriculture and the Royal Agricultural Society of England. I'm also a beef and sheep farmer from Sussex. So at IFA, we work with farmers to demonstrate the latest research, tech and innovation on farms. And we aim to bridge that gap between farmers, researchers, startups and industry. And we really aim to put the research into practice to farmers to really make it, on the ground and practical for them. And we very much work at the end of the dissemination. So we really want to make sure that other farmers are involved in the adoption of those practices as well. So it's not the research and innovation isn't wasted just to those farms. So we're involved sort of at the dissemination end of those practices. And in terms of projects I'd like to see, I guess I'm obviously biased towards the ruminant side of things, but I think anything that can help farmers make their businesses more efficient and profitable and reduce greenhouse gas emissions on farm. Our Farm of the Future programme is very much focused around those sort of things. So future fuels, AD on farm, methane emissions, things like that.
Fantastic. And Siwan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Tom. Morning, everyone. I'm Siwan Howatson. I'm joining you from Wales today. So I work for Farming Connect, which is a knowledge transfer programme here in Wales, funded by the Welsh Government. Farming Connect has been running since 2011 now. But in this current programme, which started in 2023, we're currently in a 3-year programme, and the first 2 years of the programme was worth 22.8 million, and now we've had an extension for another year. So the main aim of Farming Connect is to help farmers thrive and change their businesses. And I'm very lucky to have the exciting job of leading the demonstration network within that knowledge transfer programme, which we call the Our Farms Network here in Wales. So as Holly mentioned, similar to what they do, it's about taking research and bridging that gap into practical techniques and systems on farms. So within the network, we've currently just recruited more farmers. So we're now working with 288 unique businesses across 128 projects. So those projects can vary from individual projects to group projects, and there's different tiers and different ways that people can get involved in those. The main aim for us is to get as many farmers involved in doing some sort of on-farm trials or projects, because it can really, pay dividends and be so beneficial for those businesses that we've seen. And then obviously being a knowledge transfer programme, a lot of the work that we do as a team is then to take what we've gained from data or lessons learned and finding new ways of working, is to transfer that to the wider community. So we do a lot of knowledge transfer events using and different other knowledge transfer channels as well. In terms of what I'd like to see from Adopt, there's quite a big scope, I think, for farmers to now really ask the question, what do they want to see? We could give a list of technology or X, Y, and Z, but what we've found in Farming Connect and the Our Farms network is that it must be a project or a trial that's going to be of interest and benefit to those farmers involved. So one thing I'd say is, when you're thinking of your project, is to ask, what is the current challenge I've got, or what is the opportunity I can see, and go down that route. And if you've really got an interest in it, it will be a success.
Great. No, thank you very much for that, Sue. And wow, what was that? 128 projects.
Yeah, it's been a busy 2 years. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure we can learn a thing or two from your experiences. But moving on to Becky, last but not least, please introduce yourself, Becky Swinn.
Yeah, hi. So I work for Innovative Farmers, and we're a program within the Soil Association. So as Kate already mentioned, we've been running since 2012, and the whole point of the program was to basically make the case for and demonstrate the case for the need for more farmer-led research. So the focus has always been on supporting farmers to run experiments that they're already running, but in a more structured way with the support of researchers and other advisors, to mean that they can come away with more certainty about whether or not that practice will actually work on their site. But also our role has been to connect farmers that might be doing something in isolation with others that would also really be interested in the same topic. So we've been doing that kind of in many cases where we'll have field labs, which that's how we refer to these farmer-led projects. We'll have field labs, you know, nationwide with farmers across the UK trialing the same thing, or sometimes they're very regionally specific, sometimes working with organisations like water companies, for example, or Rivers Trust, that sort of thing, to help look at an issue on a local level. So field labs have always had an agroecological focus as well. So we're always looking at low input solutions, really. And also we run events and do a lot of communications work as well to showcase what's coming out of the field labs so that the wider farming community can learn from them. So to date, we've had over 150 field labs. I think it's 157 at the moment, and over 800 trialists, so farmers running trials as well, and working with over 40 research organisations. So we basically just want as many people to be involved as possible. In terms of a particular field lab that I just wanted to mention, there's quite a lot to choose from, but I've really enjoyed working with a group of potato growers. So I wasn't directly involved in this field lab, but they were interested in a way to reduce a very common potato pest called potato cyst nematode in their crops. And so they looked at whether or not they could grow something called a trap crop beforehand to intentionally attract that pest out at the wrong time so it couldn't feed and couldn't continue its life cycle, so kind of reducing those numbers. So what happened in that field lab, we had 4 farmers take part, and they were supported by HDB, Produce Solutions, and Optigrowth Services and Harper Adams University. They ended up working out how well those trap crops could establish the kind of protocols to establish them within the UK, because they were only really grown in Africa and Mediterranean countries, particularly. So we didn't know how to do that in the UK. At the end of that field lab, they actually ended up getting a bigger DEFRA grant to then work out which one was most effective at control of the potato pest. And now they've come back and now they're doing another field lab looking at whether they can also use trap crops as a silage for cattle. So it's kind of this really fun experimental field lab where they're just following their research questions as they come. And it's just been a joy to work with them. And yeah.
They're fantastic. Gosh, what a depth of experience that you've got there. So now I just wanted to please do bring your questions forward. As I say, we don't necessarily we can't provide you with the definitive answers on specific questions from Innovate, but we can certainly raise the questions and perhaps we'll have views on that. And if there's anything that remains unanswered, then we'll certainly do our best to make sure that it is answered. I think there are various areas of this. This is obviously, it's a new fund, and everyone's finding their feet in it. So, so please do bring your questions forward. But I noticed at the webinar that took place yesterday, the launch webinar, there were a load of questions that were asked, and some that were not really addressed. I don't think they had time to address all of them. So I just wanted to raise 2 or 3 of those today. The first one was around costs. Now, as I say, there's the actual the cost of these projects between 50 and 100,000, and exactly how that's going to be split up in terms of how much do the farmers get, and within that, how much you can actually claim, what is going to be an eligible cost and what isn't going to be an eligible cost. And I think that is quite a movable feast, and exactly how you can come to those costs as well, which I thought we could look at. Now, one area, of course, to look at is labour, and we've got a poll, and I was going to ask my colleague Sky to bring the poll up, if you can do that, Sky, on the actual sort of the costs of labour, and in terms of on a farm. Have we got the poll? Is that or do I have to start the poll? Laura.
Tom, you might have to start that poll if that's
I might have to start it myself. Okay, let's there we go. Yeah, so if you were to hire out your time, indicate the figure that you think is closest to how much you would expect to be paid. So this is just for your time, okay? Your time, experience, professional network, and agricultural expertise. So don't include, cost of managing equipment or driving equipment like a tractor or anything like that. This is just for your time only. And so this is specifically for farmers. It may be that you already hire out your time on on a sort of time only basis, and I'd be interested to know how much you would charge if that is the case. And I'm sure there are loads of contractors here, people who do contract. So just bear in mind that this is not including the equipment that you're using or your resources. This is just for your time. So that's interesting. We're looking. It looks as though £250 a day is about the going rate. Quite a few on £350 a day as well. Yeah, and then a couple on £450 a day, £500 a day. Some who are much less on £170 a day. Now, the reason that the £170 a day is in there is that if you haven't got evidence of what your pay slips are, the general attitude of Innovate UK is, I'm just going to end that poll now. And oh, sorry, I don't know if you saw the results. Can you now see them? Sorry about that. There we go. So yes, the lead is the most popular one was £250 a day, and then followed by £350 a day. And we had a few others who are higher than that, and a few others who are lower than that. But I guess somewhere between £250 and £350 a day is the going rate. Now, the interesting thing, as I say, there is that hang on, sorry, I'm just going to close that down. Is that Innovate, if you haven't got pay slips to show what the evidence of your labour, the usual attitude of Innovate is that it defaults to a rate of £170 a day. Now, I would suggest that farmers are worth far more than £170 a day. And I think, £250 to £350 a day is about the going rate. I'd say £350 a day should be the rate. And I don't know, the other element of this is costs. Now, what they have indicated is that there's quite a lot of leeway for you to use John Nicks and things like that to bring costs of a trial in. Now, I'd suggest that, the John Nicks cost is for spraying a field, for example, is something like £23 a day. That's £23 per hectare. If you're doing a farm trial, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more than £23 to do a proper tramline trial. And I don't know what sort of experience. I just want to sort of. Has anyone got any experience of doing costs? Becky, what do you think?
Sorry, I was just going to mention that if Sarah Clarke is on the call, she would also be able to answer this one, but that she's responded to me about this, that they could also use timesheets as well. So I don't have experience beyond, so I just wanted to mention that now.
Yeah, Kate, what do you think?
So this is interesting because it's great that they've included time. Brilliant, because actually a lot of these kinds of programs haven't been able to include farmer time. It's been pure kind of capital costs only, or the researcher gets paid. And I would hear quite often a comment from farmers getting eventually fed up, going, I'm the only one in the room not getting paid for this. And there was a big ask to get them to shift their thinking to say you need to value their time, because they had the funders had the view of, well, this will be helping their business, so therefore they should invest their time in it. And it's like, well, you're asking for more than just business improvements and productivity. You're also asking for public benefit. It's more complicated than that. So it's great that they've done it, but I imagine there will be pushback unless you can prove it really well. But you don't underestimate the time you will need on the trial. You will need a lot of time, a lot of thinking time, a lot of desk time in the evening to just work it through. And if you've booked yourself plenty of time at a lower rate, it's probably going to be quite realistic to the actual number of days that you've thought about that you might need to put in. And because the budget balances will need a lot of negotiation, because let's face it, the researchers and the kit are going to be expensive probably. You know, it's a juggling act, but it's always tempting to put a very high daily rate. But if it means you've actually reduced the number of days, you might find yourself getting a little bit frustrated that you haven't given yourself enough time. So I would just say it's great that it's there. I understand the juggle, but don't underestimate the time you might want to give to the trial to actually make it really helpful to you.
Yeah, Belinda.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we've done quite a lot of conversations about R&D tax credits as well. And so it's our understanding that agriculture is one of the lowest sectors in terms of claiming R&D tax credits. So if any farmers who are engaging in exactly the sort of things that Kate said, even that thinking time, do talk to a professional advisor as to what might be eligible, because there might be some other benefits that are sort of indirect, actually, you know, cash benefits, but indirect from this project.
Yes, that's a good point. And I think the Treasury's now introduced a time limit on when you can claim tax credits. So if you're claiming for the past, the year ending 2024 opportunity is now gone. Year ending 2025, you've got until, I think it's August, but check with your accountant on that. But yes, and you they can be quite generous depending on the nature of your claim. That's a good point. Has anyone else got any comments in particular on costs? I mean, it has to be said, it's not so much evidencing the amount of time you do it, and timesheets is a very good way of doing that. I'm not entirely sure how many farmers actually keep timesheets. I certainly don't when I'm farming, but it's actually evidencing it, because, you know, especially if you're a partner or a sole trader, then evidencing how much you're actually paid by the farm can be quite tricky, you know, in terms of working that out on a daily rate. And I don't know whether has anyone got any experience of working out daily rates at all? I mean, I have to say the way I did it was I just sort of worked out what our profit was and then divided it by a day, and you know, farm profit's not a great thing these days, so it didn't work out all that well. But when I set up BOFIN, then we set it up under a different structure with proper pay slips and everything. But I think it's an important point. And the other aspect is actually paying people properly to do a farm trial, because the sort of operations you're talking about here, it's not the same as doing a standard commercial field operation. And to use John Nick's or agricultural costings is not really accurate. Holly.
I was just going to say, Tom, obviously each project will have to have a project facilitator, so they will obviously be able to help you with all of this sort of stuff as well, because they will obviously have expertise in all of this. That's the idea of the project facilitator, and they are a mandatory part of the full grant process, so they should be able to assist with all that sort of stuff as well. Just bear that in mind.
No, that's a very good point. And these are the sorts of things that you'll want to raise with your project facilitator. And indeed, if the questions aren't available or the answers aren't available, then you know, the Adopt Support Hub is there, of course. No, moving on. There was another area that came up in the Q&A yesterday, which was around dissemination, and it's a really important part of the Adopt program, that all of the projects that they're looking for a hefty amount of dissemination to come out from it, to share the knowledge from those. Now the Adopt Support Hub, I believe, is going to be doing some dissemination, and certainly giving people the platform at various events and things like that in order to disseminate it, and, you know, bringing together case studies. And there's the hub itself on Farm Pep, which is going to carry all of those, and there are already some really great case studies on there actually to have a look at. But disseminating your individual project, and this doesn't seem to be, I mean, there is an emphasis on doing it, but I'm not sure whether there's any guidance on, how much you should dedicate to it. Are we talking about getting a professional involved in this? Have you got any views on this, Kate?
I don't think they expect you to get any professionals involved. I do think the expectation is the hub really helps make that easy, that the hub will want to keep in touch with how your project's going, and just try and make sure that connections are made when they make sense. If lots of ideas come in that are really similar, or you might have an idea in say Devon, and there's another idea on the Scottish borders that could absolutely team up, that's where the hub could work really nicely, and that already starts your story that captures people to go, that's interesting, why is that relevant, what are they doing about it, how are they going about it? And that was something that programs like Innovative Farmers did very well, in just really cutting to the chase of why it mattered. And it didn't necessarily always sound super sort of sophisticated and high-tech researchy type stuff. It really mattered to those farmers, and that in itself is the important story. I don't think you should write in any comms plans or anything like that. Just be prepared to say out loud in a few minutes why you're doing it and why it's interesting and why it matters. And the farmers do that better than anybody, really. And I imagine that the hub with I think it's the UK Agri-TechE centres is sort of slightly in charge, the project leaders in regards to communications that can help compile those stories. But I just one point around, I think there's often a hesitation around IP and communicating in a public space. If you have something that is highly sensitive to IP, just be sure that this is the right funding mechanism for you, because there are lots of others with Innovate UK that deal really effectively for businesses in that space. This is very much about farmers mobilizing mobilizing innovation on their farm, and it's about them. It's not about high refinement of your technologies or innovations. So just be mindful. There are lots of other funding schemes, and the hub will be able to direct you as well if you don't already know, and so will KT, and I keep calling it KT, Innovate UK's Business Connect. They're really good at that. Just be mindful, it's not just because there's a pot of money there doesn't mean it's a perfect fit particularly if you're an innovation business.
Great. Yeah, no, and it's worth mentioning as well that, those farmers might be thinking, well, why on earth would I want to share my the results of my trial? Just keep it to myself. But the experience, certainly with the experience that we've had, is that those farmers who share what they know, they get more back from others than they actually share themselves. And it does become this sort of perpetual building thing. So Holly.
Sorry, thanks, Tom. So I was just going to echo what Kate said. Yeah, the UK Agri-TechE centres are leading this part of the support hub, the dissemination part of the projects, and we're working with them on that. So yeah, so I don't think the projects themselves have to sign up to any necessarily dissemination, but part of it is that they will. Obviously, the expectation is that the projects are going to be shared. We're going to be doing case studies. We're going around, obviously, at the moment promoting Adopt. Then it will lead on to promotion of the case studies and the trials that are being done, because that's very much obviously part of it. We want to knowledge exchange. We want to share the ideas. So as Kate said, if that's not sort of what you're thinking, but again, I think it's fabulous, and that's what we want. So we want to be able to demonstrate that farmers are doing all this stuff, and it's a great thing to do. But yeah, no, there's no expectation on the actual farmers to do that themselves. The project facilitators and the UK Agri-TechE centres and us at Innovation Agriculture will be helping them with that.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point. Absolutely. Siwan, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I was just going to add then, from our experience in Farm & Connect, we find that the projects that are working up with group of farmers, so we've got 3 different tiers. We've got what we call Pan-Wales projects that run projects on various sites across Wales. We've got discussion group projects where there's a group of farmers in a discussion group. They've come up with a challenge that's applicable to all of them. And then there's something that's called the Tryouts Fund, where a group of farmers can also apply for that. And I think the importance of thinking of working in a group for this is that dissemination will then happen very naturally across that group as well. And we do find in Farm & Connect that farmer to farmer, talking about what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what have you learned? It's not just about the success, it's also about the good and bad and the ugly of these on-farm trials. And we find that that dissemination, you know, in quite a naturally organic way. And it doesn't mean an on-farm event, but it's just, you know, speaking about that to the farmers just goes a long way when it comes to these kind of projects, and trying to group up with like-minded farmers right from the start will make that journey of dissemination a lot easier, I think.
No, that's a really good point, as Siwan. And also, you know, don't underestimate the amount of time that you could put to this, you know, especially if you're going to events, things. Events, I find, are the best for sharing that farmer knowledge. When farmers get together in the same room, then the knowledge sharing is fantastic. But it does, you know, that takes time out of your day. Takes you away from your farm. Don't underestimate the cost of that, you know, when it comes to doing your costs. Becky, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just something, again, we're reflecting on the experience of innovative farmers. One thing that we've improved on has been about disseminating the outputs of what we're doing in events, in sort of our invitations for events, but also just sharing the right case studies. Much more actively, we're much more targeted with like who we're approaching, you know, whether that would be, if it was a sheep event, we're going to the National Sheep Association, or, you know, we're going to local groups and very specific sector groups, and making much more of a concerted effort to engage with them, because that question, which is scored around knowledge exchange, the sorts of things that are asked are the type of activity, and also which other organizations you're collaborating with and disseminating through. So that's definitely an important part of it. And just make sure that you're putting enough time to doing that quite actively, rather than just expect, you know, obviously the Adopt Support Hub will definitely help a lot, but I think it'd be really useful to do that as well, to make sure you're actively doing that. And one thing that we've also found useful, obviously events, great. Something we've been doing a bit more is also working with farmers and paying for them, if they're keen and have time and would like to be upskilled in this area, to create their own DIY films. And we've been supporting with some of the editing. So like currently there's a project which we've got on, we're sort of in the middle of, which we're supporting with some of the editing on. But they might also want to develop those skills, because you know, for their own purposes. And yeah, so just things like that. I think it's quite a nice opportunity to be very creative with the way you want to share what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's nice that you can be paid for it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good points there, Becky. I was just going to turn to one of the questions in the Q&A from Helen Glass. Thanks, Helen. About the intervention rate for farmers is now 80%, but finding that 20% can still initially be challenging for some farmers. So, what tips do the panel have or have used to convince farmers who may be new to R&D projects on how return on investment for their contribution can be recouped? The special mention for you, Belinda, for mentioning the R&D tax credits there as well. But that's a really good point, and it has to be said, this is one thing that I often bang on about to ministers, that there's no first mover advantage in farming. If you're the first farmer to pioneer a new method, then you put in all the work and you put in all the time and the effort and so on, and that's often an on cost that you never recoup. And it's actually the next people who then benefit from the cost that you've made. So that's why I think it's really great, therefore, that's being recognised now with Adopt, and that farmers are being paid. But yeah, there is that thing that, you know, it's still only 80%. You know, what about the other 20%? How can you be sure you're actually recouping that within your system? Has anyone on the panel got any experience of that? Of recouping that extra 20%. I mean, I have to say, the investment, I see it on my farm as a bit of a it's a cost, and you hope that that you'll see but I can never put a figure on it. Holly.
Sorry, I think I was just about to say similar to you, Tom, in that, yeah, you're hoping that you're doing something that's going to improve your efficiency and your profitability going forward. So yeah, it's not a golden bullet, I'm afraid. I don't have the exact answer of how you get that 20% back, but I think you'd hope that it would come back through efficiencies and that later down the line.
Belinda.
Yeah, this might be a slightly controversial thing to say, but I think if you're struggling, so if you've got a £50,000 project and you're struggling on the 20% match, innovating is very hard from a position of weakness. And I think we have to possibly accept that this programme perhaps isn't for everybody. And I know that there's, it's a massively challenging time for farmers at the moment, and any opportunity to help them advance and develop, of course, we want to welcome that. But I think, as Kate put so eloquently at the top of this podcast, this is not easy money. And if you're really struggling to find that 20% match, then I think there's, perhaps some conversations to have within the business. Now, that said, obviously, as you've both just articulated, the return on investment is quite intangible, and that's something that we're looking at doing, is helping people really start to calculate, whether you're a tech developer or a farmer adopter, start to get your arms around what this return on investment piece could look like. You see tech developers going, oh, it'll save you, this amount of money, but really you need to get under the skin of that. So it's very, very difficult and very challenging. And without wanting to be a sort of Debbie Downer, I would say that really think quite carefully. This is quite a big commitment to get into this. This is not easy money. So, go into it with your eyes open, and it does have to be resourced properly.
It has to be said, as an industry, I think the AHDB did some research into this. As an industry, in terms of how we learn, we tend to be theorist learners in the farming sector, so that we like to see other people, we'll follow other people's practices, but it needs to be sort of established and so on before we'll make the change, generally speaking. There is a small community within us who are activist learners, risk takers and pioneers and so on. And I think the Adopt is really suited for them. Those people who are already curious farmers, they're already doing it on their own farm, and this is an opportunity to share, learn from others, and grow their experience, and also be paid for it. Admittedly, not completely reimbursed for it, but get some money back for it. So Siwan, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on the return on investment, and it's not from a Farming Connect programme, but the organisation that I work for, Mentera, we were also leading the EAP Wales project, which was working with 46 group of farmers. So in total, around 240 farmers. And that funding has come to an end in Wales. And the evaluation report was launched last year. And from that evaluation, it showed that 50% of those businesses noted that they did have either a reduce in costings or increased profit as part of being part of a project in the EIP Wales. So, 50% is, as you've discussed, there is a risk that it won't be beneficial money-wise. But what it does offer, what all the participants of the EIP said, is that it took the risk out, majority of the risk out of trying something new. So I think that's key here. And, from those 50% of farmers that did say that they had reduced profit or increased profitability, that also had a big range in it. So, you have to think of that when you're thinking about a project. The range in EIP ranged from £400 to £50,000. So massive, it could be a massive benefit for farming businesses. But I think it's important to take that time, make sure you're collaborating with right companies, right organisations that are going to help you be one of those farmers that are going to see that return on investment from projects.
Now, I see Belinda and Kate, you've got your hands up, but I just wanted to bring in another question from Hermina Ely here, who has, how much are ideas dependent on coming from the farmers, and or how much are researchers going out to provoke engagement, raise awareness of opportunities? So is it about the farmers themselves coming up with their own ideas and challenges and so on, looking to address those, or is it about the tech and being introduced to new tech and so on? Well, it doesn't have to be tech, new ideas that could perhaps come from researchers, tech innovators and so on. I don't know whether that's relevant to what you were going to say, Kate.
It actually does neatly tie in. So what I was going to say before in regards to money, if you're really laser focused, if you really want it, your risk tolerance changes, right? It's your business, but you've been thinking about it a long time. You want to give it a go with a group of other farmers, perhaps that you trust, that maybe you're part of a discussion group. You've been talking about it for a while. You're going to give it a go. Your risk tolerance will be different. than if somebody has come to you and gone, I've got this amazing thing. I saw that you cared about blah, and I've got this. That's slightly different because the relationship is different. And there will be circumstances where that happens. There will be advertising and marketing of solutions onto farmers, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it alters the dynamic if that wasn't something you had originally thought of. So being aware of your risk tolerance there, when you are taking a 20% hit potentially, is important. But going back just slightly on the 20% kind of investment, shall we say, of yourself. Again, what I said before about your time, think a little bit around how much of your time you invest here. Do you want to, when you think of that kind of that budget spreadsheet and your time is in there, are you up for saying, you know what, I care so much about this that I'm going to think of that 20% as being my time. You still budget it in, of course, but if you think of it because you care about it so much that actually you are willing to give your time mentally is that 20%. I'm not suggesting, faffing about with the figures. What I'm saying is that it's that sort of mental shift of going, that's my investment there. I'm willing to take it. I care about it. It was really important to me. I have to solve this. I've got other people that care too, and I want to get the right expertise at my kitchen table to figure this out in a pragmatic way that's going to really move me forward. That all of a sudden doesn't become that hard a decision to make. The rest is exactly how you do it. And that's the place you want to be at. So I would, if you are an innovation company, absolutely, you will be wanting to tell people what is out there, and farmers do want to know what developments are out there, but also be aware of how you might sound and they'll be potentially hit by lots of offers and interest. This isn't kind of TRL development type funding. This is about farmers implementing things that they really need. So there's a slight shift there, but I think you can't be convinced to try something and take a 20% hit easily. It would bite you. And what we don't want to see is a bunch of farmers get involved in something that then get put off for life, because that's a disaster. We want people, exactly like Becky said before, that continue to innovate. Oh, well, there's this additional thing. Great, you've got a gang of interesting people and interesting researchers and companies, and it's developing, and that's what's going to push the industry forward.
Yeah, no, it has to be said. I mean, I'm the worst when it comes to new tech, by the way, because I'm like a magpie. If it glitters, I go, oh, I love it. I must get it on my farm. And you just have to sort of wind yourself in. And I think the assessors will be looking for projects that are true to the lead farmer, that it's obviously an area of interest for them, and whether they involve a tech partner or a research partner or not, I think that's the integral part of it. But Siwan, you've got your hand up.
From our experience, I would just say don't underestimate the ideas farmers have. They know exactly what their challenge is and where they see opportunities on their farms, and we see where the project or on-farm trial idea genuinely from the farmer are the ones that have the biggest success. So I think for me personally, I'd love to see them all being more farmer-led, but bringing in people and organisation to support that. But I think, as Kate's mentioned, that commitment is going to come when it's genuinely an idea that a farmer wants to try.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that's really the spirit of Adopt that we'd all like to see. We do want to see. And we've all seen it. Farmers do have the best ideas, and it's bringing that knowledge forward and having it valued as well. I think that is the key here. Becky.
Yeah, I would just say that I guess again, based on our experience in innovative farmers, farmer-led and sort of making use of tech, they're not mutually exclusive. You can do both. So in field labs, for example, we've whilst we are definitely not there to as a platform to test tech directly, it has been really useful in some projects to particularly when as a tool to help make decisions, to do assessments, that sort of thing. So we've had mobile sensors which are mapping soil health, and we've got a session on that at Groundswell actually with BOFIN, so we can talk about that at that one. We've had we've had a project where in some tomato glass houses they were using an ongoing crop sensor to monitor water flows, which was really useful then to assess disease levels and what in the glass house was impacting those. So I think there's really good ways of making use of tech to support farmer-led ideas. It's just it's kind of, I think one thing is farmers also aren't always necessarily aware of everything that's available to them to support with this. Like if in the example I just mentioned before about mobile sensors, this was looking at the impact of min-till practices on soil health, and in that case the farmer wasn't particularly aware of what was available to help them do that, but because of having the right connections made, then they found out about this amazing mapping tool which took thousands of samples across their field and really reduced labor and the cost of having to do that themselves, obviously. So it's just, I think, there's something there about making people aware of what tech is actually really useful to support them in those trials as well.
No, that's a really good point, and that point about using sensors as well. I mean, the aim here is that the innovation has to be replicable, or the advance has to be replicable if it's going to get anywhere, if it's going to advance us. And the only way to know that is that if it's measured. And so if you can bring a sensor onto your farm to measure that change, then everyone's going to benefit. And so, there is the tech out there. I guess it's a question of finding the right tech for you. And I think the Adopt Support Hub, to a large extent, is going to help there. Holly, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I was only going to say that, Tom. I was just going to say the support hub is very much there for that. Like, and there's no idea is stupid. If you've got an idea, do wing it. Put it through to the support hub, and they'll be, if you haven't got a partner or a tech partner, they'll be able to hopefully link you up. And we've got a network of climate smart demo farms. We're hoping some of them will come through. And it's not all about tech. It could be an innovative practice. It's not all definitely about tech. That's all I wanted to.
Now, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and there was one other area that came up in the questions and answers yesterday that wasn't really addressed, and that's around the timing of these funding rounds. So we've got round one of the facilitator fund, for example, that's now open. You can apply for that, but you're not actually going to hear until the 10th of July, and yet the first round of the actual full Adopt grant ends on the 26th of June, I think it is, or thereabouts. Has anyone got? I mean, it sounds to me as though you're going to have to do a speculative bid to start with. The first ones that come through, you're not going to know whether you're going to get paid, and I'm hoping that you can get paid retrospectively for it. Especially if you get you go to the cost of getting a facilitator involved. Holly, I noticed you put your hand up.
Sorry, so I only because I brought this up yesterday as well. So the idea is, as you say, you either go straight in for the full grant in the round one, or you go for the support grant first, and then they're aiming to get that done so that you can then put your full grant into the round two.
Right.
So that's what I was told yesterday anyway, because I raised that as well, how the timelines are working. Yeah.
Kate, what's your view on this?
So I would be surprised if they retrospectively paid you if you put in for round one that you then came back. But I think those projects that have maybe done field labs, they have done other things, they've got clear ideas, they know how to work as a group. I reckon go for it in round one. And I'm sure across the networks of organizations that have been doing this kind of thing for a while, and every single one of the people on this call know of groups that are quite familiar with this way of working, maybe not under this exact structure, but quite familiar with this. If they've got ideas, go for round one, hit the ground running, and just the feedback will come back. If you're not successful, then okay, well, let's work out why. It could be that Innovate need to change some of their process. It might not be perfect at their end. They are quite new to this way of looking at projects, for example. But I think just hit the ground running. If you already exist as a group, you've already got a bit of history of doing kind of real pragmatic trials. Everybody else, if it's brand new to you, my advice is talk to the hub, get your ducks in a row. It might take longer than you think. And then by the time July comes round, you know, you might be getting some momentum. Would be my advice. I think it would be a big ask if you've never done any of this stuff to go straight in round one, to try and predict everything that they would want. You could waste a lot of your time. But as Holly says, absolutely engage the hub. The really cool thing about this fund is that this innovation support service exists. And that's worked really well in Wales. It works in Northern Ireland. It's worked in Scotland. England is last to catch on, but we've got there. It's made up of some really pragmatic organizations. So it's, you know, it's the best we could hope for really in that regard. So really make use of it, because business connect are good, but they're better for businesses that not necessarily farmers. They're learning, but I would say that the hub are much more in tune with what you're about really.
Great. No, well, thank you very much for that. I've just realised that we had another poll that I was going to bring up, and I'm not sure we actually got time to run it. But I've brought up some QR codes for quick links to take you to the Adopt Support Hub, the BOFIN WhatsApp community, project facilitator. Thank you very much for your questions that you brought through. Thank you so much to our panelists as well, to Kate Pressland, to Belinda Clarke, Becky Swinn, Holly Shearman, and Siwan Howatson. And thank you, all of you, for joining us. We had a really great crowd here today. We will be distributing a link to the video of this, so you can watch it again and glean all the information. But please do, if you've got further questions, bring them to the support hub, bring them to our WhatsApp community, and we'll try and get those answered. And bring your ideas forward as well. Please do. We're longing to hear from you. Well, thank you very much, everyone, again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.